Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we tackle your most pressing questions and really get into the research. Today, we have a question that cuts right to the heart of preventative health, and it comes from one of you.
We heard from Elton, who's a 71-year-old stroke survivor,
Uh,
and his story is, well, it's pretty remarkable. He had a stroke 6 years ago, got intensive care, TPA, therapy, the works, and he's recovered about 98% of his function.
which is just incredible. But his observation after all that is, it's stark. He asked us, why did none of my doctors, not at the hospital, not my neurologist, not my cardiologist, why did nobody mention that my diet could have played a role?
Exactly. Or that changing his diet could be one of his best tools to prevent another stroke. It just highlights this huge gap between, nutritional science and what's happening in standard clinical practice.
So Elton specifically asked us to look into the mind diet. He wants to know, does it work? What's the program actually look like? And maybe most importantly, what's it going to take for the medical system to actually recommend this stuff?
And that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to look at the evidence, the good, the bad, and the controversial, so you can walk away knowing exactly what this is all about.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. The name, MIND-D. It's a bit of a mouthful.
It is. It stands for Mediterranean Day-Ash Intervention for Neurodegenerative Delay.
Right.
But the name really tells you its origin story. Researchers saw that the Mediterranean diet and the Day-Ash diet, which is for stopping hypertension, were both great for vascular health.
Okay, so they took two already proven diets.
Exactly. And they created this hybrid specifically optimized to prevent cognitive decline in older adults. It's really a blueprint for brain resilience.
So how does it work? How do you measure it?
Well, it's broken down into 15 components, which makes it pretty straightforward. You have two main categories, 10 brain-healthy food groups you really want to prioritize, and then 5 groups you need to limit.
And this is the outline Elton was asking for.
This is the practical outline.
Okay, let's nail those down. What are the 10 foods you're supposed to be eating?
All right, so the 10 you prioritize are green leafy vegetables. That's a big one.
Like spinach, kale?
Yep. Then other vegetables, nuts, legumes, so that's your beans and lentils, whole grains, fish, poultry, and olive oil as your main fat. And then the 2 stars really are berries and, well, the green leafy vegetables I already mentioned.
Berries. That's a unique addition.
A key part of what makes the MIND diet different.
And what about the 5 groups to limit? This is where you get the vascular risk reduction, right?
That's the key. You're minimizing the things we know clog arteries. So you limit red meat, butter and stick margarine, cheese, sweets, and desserts, and fried or fast food.
You don't have to eliminate them completely, but they have to be rare.
Sparingly, exactly. That's how you get a high MIND score.
And to make this real, the sources show this is a diet where you're not just having a side salad. We saw examples like a green shakshuka with Swiss chard or big kale salads. It's aggressively green.
You nailed it. It's a plant-predominant, healthy, fat-heavy pattern. It's a fundamental shift away from high-saturated fat.
So that brings us to Elton's main concern, prevention. The diet was designed for the brain, but did they get a 2-for-1 deal here? What does the research say about heart health, blood vessels, and preventing another stroke?
The answer is a pretty emphatic yes. It's excellent for heart health. A big systematic review looked at all these different cardiometabolic risk factors.
Which is basically shorthand for things like heart disease, diabetes, blood pressure.
Exactly. And the review concluded that the MIND diet is strongly associated with improvements across the board.
Improvements like what, specifically?
We're talking lower blood pressure, better blood sugar control, improved cholesterol numbers, and just less inflammation in the body. The scientific consensus is clear. This should be recommended to reduce cardiometabolic risk.
Which is exactly what Elton should have been told. Do we have specific data tying it directly to a lower risk of stroke itself?
We do. One big case control study found a strong inverse association.
So just to be clear, that means the more you follow the MIND diet.
The lower your odds of having a stroke. A substantial reduction.
And did they find any specific foods that were doing the heavy lifting?
They did, yeah. When they broke it down, 3 groups really stood out for protecting your blood vessels. Whole grains reduced cardiovascular disease risk by 60%.
Wow.
Beans reduced it by 65%, and green leafy vegetables by 45%. It's that synergy you get from the whole pattern.
Now, I did see one potentially contradictory finding, a study that showed a positive association between the diet and non-fatal heart attacks and strokes. That seems to throw a wrench in the works.
That's a great question, and it really shows you how careful researchers have to be. That finding, it completely disappeared. It lost all statistical significance once they excluded people who died within the first 2 years of follow-up.
Why would they do that? What's the logic there?
It's to correct for something called reverse causation bias.
Can you break that down?
Sure, it's the idea that someone might already be sick, they have undiagnosed heart disease, for example, and because they feel unwell, they suddenly change their diet.
Ah, so the hidden disease caused the diet change, not the other way around.
Precisely. If you include that data, it looks like the diet is linked to the event. But once you remove that short-term noise, the long-term trend toward benefit is solid. So while the vascular benefits are critical for Elton, the area where this diet first made huge waves was cognitive protection. This is where the initial data was. Well, it's just astounding.
Okay, this is the exciting part. What did they find on preventing diseases like Alzheimer's?
The original 2015 study, a prospective one, reported that older adults with the highest adherence to the diet reduced their risk of developing Alzheimer's disease by a staggering 53%.
53%.
53%. And even moderate adherence dropped the risk by 35%. I mean, think about that. We have no drug that comes close to that.
And it wasn't just about avoiding a diagnosis, right? It was about protecting day-to-day function.
Exactly. High adherence was linked to a much slower rate of cognitive decline. The overall benefit was so significant that the highest scoring participants had a cognitive profile of someone 7.5 years younger.
7.5 years younger. So they were literally thinking younger.
Measurably younger in their cognitive abilities, yes.
What about for people who have already had a stroke, like Elton? Does it help protect the brain after an event?
That's a crucial question. And yes, the data is really encouraging there. A study of nearly 6 years followed older stroke survivors. It found that those with higher mind scores had a significantly slower rate of decline in their global cognition. So it helps build this sort of firewall against further damage.
So what makes it better than, say, just the Mediterranean diet for the brain? Is it those specific ingredients you mentioned?
It absolutely is. The researchers intentionally emphasize green leafy vegetables and berries. And these two groups are just powerhouses of flavonoids and anthocyanins compounds known for their, antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties.
Right.
Postmortem studies have actually shown that people who eat more of these foods have less of the pathological markers of Alzheimer's, less amyloid and tau protein buildup in the brain.
So it's like a targeted nutritional approach. That's the key difference. Okay, we have to talk about the controversy. In 2023, after all this amazing data, a big randomized controlled trial in RCT came out, and the media basically called it a failure. What happened there?
That is a classic case of the media narrative just completely missing the scientific nuance. So it was a 3-year trial on cognitively normal, overweight adults. And the headline result was that there was no statistically significant difference in cognitive change between the mind diet group and the control group.
So on paper, it looked like it didn't work.
On paper, yes. But our sources suggest the problem wasn't the diet, it was the study's design. The methodology was just flawed.
What were the flaws?
Yeah. The single biggest issue was the control group. It wasn't really a control group. See, both groups, the mind diet group and the so-called suboptimal diet group, were told to cut 250 calories a day. And both groups got intensive behavioral coaching for weight loss.
Wait. So the control group was also on a weight loss diet?
Exactly. And they were successful. Both groups lost about 11 pounds on average. And here's the kicker. Both groups saw an improvement in their average cognition scores.
So you can't test if a race car is faster than a sedan if you give the sedan a professional driver and a tuned engine.
That's the perfect analogy. You've contaminated the control. They basically tested eating healthier and losing weight versus eating healthier, losing weight, and following the mind pattern.
And the difference between those two was just too small to measure in 3 years.
Precisely. And that's the other issue, the duration. For healthy 70-year-olds, 3 years might just be too short to see a big difference in the rate of decline. You need those long 10, 15-year studies for that.
Plus, there were issues with adherence, right?
Yeah. Their own biomarker checks showed that adherence in the diet group was only modest, and it wasn't even sustained for the full 3 years. You can't prove a diet works if people aren't really following it.
So the big takeaway here is that one flawed study shouldn't negate this mountain of other data supporting this type of eating pattern for both vascular and brain health.
Which brings us all the way back to Elton's most frustrating question. If the evidence is this compelling, what will it take for doctors and hospitals to actually recommend this?
The core issue is implementation. It's just complex. The science is there. The systematic reviews support it for reducing heart and stroke risk. The problem is the delivery.
What does that delivery gap look like in the real world?
Well, think about the successful trials. Even that flawed RCT. They had cooking sessions, group counseling, regular check-ins. You need that kind of intensive, systematic behavioral support to help people make these changes stick.
And a cardiologist can't do that in a 15-minute follow-up appointment. Not a chance. They can write a prescription for a statin in 30 seconds. That's a simple, targeted intervention.
Right.
A diet is a complex, holistic intervention. It requires a profound behavioral shift. And our healthcare system just isn't built to deliver that kind of support. It requires a move away from just treating single risk factors with pills and toward embracing these complex patterns that offer synergistic benefits. That's a huge systemic change.
So let's bring it all home for Elton. The answer to his question, does the mind diet work, seems to be a resounding yes. The long-term evidence shows a strong link to reduced stroke risk, better heart health, and really significant protection for the brain.
It really does. And if there's one really empowering lesson from that whole controversial RCT, it's this. When older adults, like Elton, successfully change their diet and lose weight, they can improve their cognition. That was true for both groups in that study.
So the act of making an intentional positive change works.
It works. It yields measurable benefits. The debate is about the fine-tuning, not the fundamental principle.
So the challenge isn't the science anymore, it's the delivery.
That's it. Given that just increasing plants and cutting processed foods showed a benefit even in that suboptimal control group, the real question for our institutions isn't if healthy eating works. We know it does. The question is, what systematic approach can we build to deliver these kinds of measurable, reinforcing behavioral changes to everyone so that every patient gets the roadmap they deserve?
Not just the discharge papers. Something to chew on. Thanks for joining us for the deep dive.